I emerged only a few seconds later, but everything was very different. Before we get started, if you love shivery fairy stories, I really think you'll love my novel, The Ghost of Nothing. It's got that same haunted, magical, eerie vibe of this channel, but turned up to 11. It's available as an audiobook, ebook, paperback, and hardcover. Honestly, it's the best thing I've ever created, so if you like what I do and you haven't read it yet, I really think you're missing out on a special experience. Links are in the description. And now, on to the stories. The incident happened in the mid-90s, probably 1996, when I would have been 21 years old. I was working as a mechanic in a garage. I worked Saturdays and I had one weekend off on a rota. As my friends were all at work on weekends, I struggled to think of things to do on my day off. I started going for bicycle rides over Cannock Chase in Stratfordshire. I lived near to a train station on the Birmingham Rugeley line, and I'd found the easiest way to do it was to just hop on the train to a spot on the edge of the chase with my mountain bike and backpack and start exploring from there. I would take a packed lunch, an ordnance survey map, and an orienteering compass and try to find somewhere I hadn't been before. On this occasion, I was cycling into the chase on Brindley Heath Road, heading toward the Marquee Drive Visitor Center, from which there were several marked trails across the chase that I hadn't fully explored. But the pie green BT tower to my west had caught my eye, and I started looking for a path through the trees to my left that might lead toward it, so I could get a better look. I soon spotted what appeared to be an unmarked gravel trail heading in the approximate direction of the tower, and turned off the road to investigate. It was early summer and the weather was mild but dull and overcast. I had caught the first train after 9:30 a.m. to avoid squeezing my bike in amongst the commuters and to take advantage of off-peak rail fares. The train journey took a little over 10 minutes, and I was about 10 to 15 minutes by bicycle from the train station, so I'm guessing it was about 10 a.m. Unlike weekends or school holidays, the chase was very quiet. There was nobody about when I started down the trail through the trees. I quickly passed through the trees and found myself in a meadow with many wildflowers. I was quite surprised as it looked like an excellent picnic spot, and I thought I knew most of the good picnic spots from being brought to the chase with my family as a child. As far as I knew, that area should have been scrubland amongst the trees with bracken and bramble and the like. I was also puzzled that I couldn't see the pie green tower or any other landmarks. The trail led up a gentle hill, and I was struggling a little to cycle on the gravel. The meadow was very pleasant, and I wasn't in any hurry, so I decided to walk my bike to the top of the hill and see if I could see the tower and get my bearings from there. I hadn't traveled far when I noticed a low structure at the side of the trail. There was a large, flat, rectangular slab of what appeared to be weathered concrete. It appeared that it was once the roof of some open-sided structure that was now mostly buried. It was covered in lichen and moss and partially overgrown with small flowers that had purchased to grow and creeping plants. There was a gap of 2 to 3 feet between the ground of the meadow and the roof of the structure. The structure was mysterious but didn't strike me as extraordinary. I'd come across various decaying World War II era structures while exploring the chase, such as an anti-aircraft gun emplacement, and I assumed this was another one of those. Then, for some reason I still can't explain, I decided to crawl through it. I could easily have walked past it or around it or even over it, but for some reason it seemed like the most natural thing in the world to crawl under the flat quote-unquote roof, pushing my bike ahead of me. I emerged only a few seconds later, but everything was very different. I was in the same meadow, but there was bright sunshine without a cloud in the sky. It was a lot hotter, and there even seemed to be a heat haze in the air. It had seemed deathly quiet between leaving the road and crawling under the structure, but now the air seemed alive with the sounds of birds and crickets. I looked around, and the gravel trail I'd been following was nowhere to be seen. The structure I'd emerged from had also changed. It now seemed to be a dry stone archway of ancient construction. The tree line that I'd emerged into the meadow from had now gone, and in its place was a stream. On the other side of that stream was a pasture that was such a bright green that it looked like it had been drawn by a child. There was a stone bridge across the stream, and sitting halfway across the stone bridge was a small girl. The girl appeared to be a little less than 3 feet high. She was of youthful appearance, but her proportions were those of a young adult. She was not a child, she simply seemed to be scaled down somehow. She had bright red curly hair with flowers in it. She seemed very pleasant and welcoming. I cannot recollect what she was wearing. These days I am an artist rather than a mechanic, and I specialize in portraiture, but I could not draw the girl. I can remember how her expression made me feel, but none of her facial features or construction. It was as if she was an idea beamed into my head rather than something I actually saw through my eyes. It's very hard to explain. I do not recall being alarmed by all of this. I do not recall thinking anything at all. I started to walk toward the bridge and the girl in the same way that I had simply decided to crawl under the structure. The next thing I know, a border collie was running around me, barking fit to burst, and it was again a dull and overcast day, and I was somewhere else. I was on a path through trees walking toward a lake surrounded by forest. Where there had been a stone bridge, there was a short wooden jetty in poor repair. I briefly glimpsed the small girl sitting on the jetty, but she looked different. She had black eyes, and her hair was darker and straight and had no flowers. She was now visibly wearing a crude, shapeless dress or smock. It didn't cover her arms, which seemed very thin. Her facial features seemed more visible somehow, but also unnatural. It made it hard to judge, but she appeared to be smirking. The dog was not aggressive, but extremely agitated. It did not seem to be specifically aware of the girl. A couple that had been walking the dog quickly came running over. They were very apologetic and said they did not know what had gotten into the dog. I was now feeling very shaken and wanted to get away as quickly as possible. I'm not sure what I mumbled at them before hopping on my bike and rapidly cycling away up the path that the couple had walked down. I'm sure they thought I was quite mad. I looked back once and did not see the girl after seeing the couple. She was not visible on the jetty or anywhere else. I had a terrible feeling of dread and just wanted to get away. I did not know where I was. I simply cycled as quickly as possible up the path the couple had come from in the hope it would lead me closer to civilization. Within a few minutes, I arrived at a road with traffic and felt extremely glad. I decided to try to work out where I was and took out my map and compass. My compass appeared to have lost all magnetic properties and has never worked again since. I could not see any landmarks, only trees. From my previous trips to Cannock Chase, I suspected I was in Birches Valley area, but did not know what direction I was facing. My watch was working and said it was 10:10 a.m., but the light seemed wrong and it felt much later. I picked a direction and started cycling, and soon came to a road junction that I recognized and knew I was near the Birches Valley Forest Center. I was heading deeper into the forest, which wasn't at the time what I wanted to be doing, but at least I knew where I was. It would have meant that the lake I'd found myself at was one of the Fair Oak fishing pools about 1.5 miles northeast of where I believed I had crawled under the structure, and the opposite side of the Brindley Heath Road and the Marquee Drive Visitor Center. I had no idea how high I had traveled between those two locations. I enjoy outdoor activities and have hiked and camped around the Scottish Highlands and Islands without getting lost, and I don't understand how I could have gotten so disoriented in a relatively small area, relatively well known to me, in what felt like such a short space of time. I turned around and started cycling back towards Hensford. I was very scared and strangely grateful whenever I could hear a car on the road. If I'd had a mobile phone back then, I'd have just called a friend or even a taxi. When I arrived back at Hensford train station, my watch said it was a little before 11 a.m. The station clock said it was a little after 6 p.m. I tried my sandwiches while waiting for the train, but they tasted spoiled and made me feel nauseous. I threw them away. I got sausage and chips from the chip shop after arriving back in Blockswich, and those tasted fine. I was very upset by the experience and struggled to sleep that night. I went for a walk to the nearby 24-hour petrol station at 3 a.m. just to talk to somebody. I have no idea what actually happened. Clearly, the most sensible explanation is that I fell off my bike and banged my head and spent the day strolling aimlessly in a confused daze. However, I do remain convinced, without being able to logically explain why, that the girl was an objectively real entity of some sort, and that I was in grave danger. I cannot say if the entity was malicious or malevolent, or how I came to interact with it, but I cannot shake the feeling that I meant no more to it than a mouse would to a cat. I also believe that it was in its own place and that I had somehow intruded into its domain. In the decades since, a lot has happened to me that I've had to come to terms with, including the deaths of people close to me. I've strangely never been able to come to terms with my feelings surrounding that day, and still become very emotional when I think of it. I was crying while writing this. I've had no other similar experiences. I've heard about various strange events in the area, but not fairies. Why do I think it was a fairy? It was encountered in the woodland, and it felt very much that it was in its own place, rather than some kind of visitor. I don't know exactly what it was, but fairy seems closest. Fairies are, my best guess, is natives of some sort, of a place that exists alongside ours. USA, Oklahoma. This isn't my only strange experience, but it's the one I trust the most, because there were others with me who witnessed the same events. It happened in 2019, the year that I graduated. The town I lived in floods every 12 years or so, and that year was one of them. The water had risen, filling the fields, creeping up roadsides, making everything feel just a little off. The night after graduation, a few of my friends and I were driving on one of the roads between towns. There were 5 of us packed into the truck, and at some point we started to think we were lost, since it was taking longer than it should have to get to our destination. We had been looking for a particular landmark, this church, which marked the turn into my friend's neighborhood. Some of my friends thought we had missed the turn and should turn back, but others thought it must be further up ahead, since the church has a bright red roof, and even at night the cross outside it is lit up brightly. It seemed unbelievable that we could have driven by it without seeing it. I was the one driving. I kept going, figuring the church had to be further up the road. That's when several of my friends pointed out these strange lights floating over the flooded fields. They looked like they were dancing. They weren't headlights or reflections or anything we could explain. It was strange. Then up ahead, we started to see what looked like people or something like people standing at the roadside far in the distance. I couldn't make out the details, just shapes shifting in the dark. I wasn't even sure what we were looking at, like maybe it was a weird formation of bushes or something. I was focused on these figures driving slowly, trying to figure out what they were, when my friend in the passenger seat gasped. Something big had just darted across the road in front of the truck. I really didn't see anything clearly myself, just a dark blur in front of the truck. But my friend in the passenger seat swore that he'd seen something human shaped dart in front of us. We were all looking around trying to spot something moving out there, but there was nothing that I could see. At this point, I felt like something very weird was going on. The figures up ahead were gone, I noticed. Now there didn't appear to be any people standing at the roadside, just trees and fields. But the lights were still dancing out there. I started rolling the car cautiously forward again, feeling very uneasy. Not long after, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and there was something back there, some kind of animal far back on the road. I don't know what it was, maybe a dog, maybe a deer, but it was weird. The way it was moving was strange to me, like it didn't seem natural. I told everyone to look back, and no one could figure out what it was. It was still pretty far in the distance, but it looked like it was moving and moving fast. It was running straight towards us. My friend said, "Speed up, speed up." And I guess I panicked at that point because I slammed on the gas and just sped forward without thinking, constantly glancing in the rear view at this thing, which I was now convinced was chasing us. I took a sharp turn at the first opportunity, and we ended up on a gravelly road with trees on either side. I looked out the rearview mirror again, and the creature wasn't back there anymore, so I just kept going. But this road was very bumpy and uneven, and eventually just ended. And we realized we were no longer on the road at all, but in a field. I stopped the car. Whether there was some creature back there or not, we needed to turn around. We had no choice. There was no way we could get through a half-flooded field without getting stuck. As I put the truck in reverse and slowly backed up, the headlights passed over several deer. I kept moving the car very slowly, and as the headlights kept moving, we were seeing more and more of them. There were probably dozens of them. These deer standing still, watching us, their eyes caught in the headlights. They didn't move, didn't run, just stared at us. It was unsettling, and I don't know how we didn't see them at first when we had driven into the field. I turned the truck around and backtracked back onto the road we had been on before and drove fast in the opposite direction, straight toward where we had seen the running creature. But this time, things looked different, to the point where I was convinced we were on a completely different road. But I don't see how that's possible since I took the exact turns I had previously taken, but in reverse. But then there it was, the church. Bright red roof, huge glowing cross that was impossible to miss, right there on the left. I was completely baffled by the situation, but relieved at the same time that we seemed to be back in normal reality again. I dropped my friend off at her house. We only started talking about everything we'd seen once we were safely in her driveway. Before then, we were all just silent. I drove down that same road later during daylight. The road felt like it was much longer that night than it was in reality, though that was possibly from fear. I did confirm that where we saw the dancing lights, there were no artificial lights that could have made those lights appear, only fields. I should say that there are a lot of stories of paranormal experiences in that town. I've even met a few people who claim to have seen fairies there. There are a lot of fairy mushroom rings in the area too, although after the flooding there were none of those rings for a year or two. So maybe the flooding disturbed something? I don't know, but those rings are back now. I do regret not having written down exactly what happened at the time, because fear blurs the memory for me. But what I've just relayed here is to the best of my recollection. I'm sure I'm missing details. Like, I don't remember if there were any strange sounds. I remember my friends and I were talking and the engine of the truck, but that's it. It was not raining. It had rained a few minutes before, but not at the time. Perhaps we would have heard something if we had rolled down the window. I'm not entirely certain it was a fairy experience, but I do think it was because of the other circumstances of what was occurring in the town at the time and the location of the experience. It also felt different from a ghost encounter. I do wonder sometimes why stuff like this only happens to some people. It's not a regular occurrence for me, but it has happened more often than others. I generally don't trust these experiences when I'm by myself, but if I have others there who also saw what I witnessed, then I trust it more. That's why I chose to share this particular experience over any other. Thanks for watching, and a huge thank you to everyone who submitted their stories for this one. There are only 2 stories in this month's video, but they were both longer than normal and particularly creepy, so I thought I'd dedicate a whole video to them. I think one of the most compelling and mysterious parts of fairy lore is the idea that there's this reality that exists alongside ours that you can just accidentally slip into. Suddenly you're in this place that looks similar to our world but feels wrong. Too quiet, too empty, like you've stepped into a place you were never meant to go. Fairy lore is full of stories about people slipping into a reality like this and having the sense that just by being there, they were in extreme danger. In a world where they didn't understand the rules or were even being hunted by some sort of predatory being. And even more unsettling are the stories where the person never comes back. These stories were told all the time historically, and in the present we're still telling them. In stories like these or missing 411 type stories, it definitely makes you wonder what's really out there. Let me know your thoughts on all of this down in the comments. I'd love to hear your theories and experiences. If you love this kind of eerie fairy lore, be sure to check out my fairy fantasy novel, The Ghosts of Nothing. It's a supernatural tale about a girl from a haunted town that turns out to have more of a fairy problem than a ghost problem. And reality isn't as stable as it seems. The fairy world of the novel, which the main character Nellie slips into, has strange rules and dangers that are based on the research that I did into fairy lore. The book has won some awards, including being a finalist in the Independent Author Association's Best Book of the Year award, and it's been getting great reviews, so if you enjoy the stories I share here, I think you'll really love it. For a chance to win a free copy of the audiobook, subscribe to my newsletter. One of my newsletters, that is, either my fairy newsletter, Fairy Lights, or my writing newsletter, The Shaken Tree. Every month, I'm randomly selecting a subscriber for this free giveaway, and it's completely free to join. You just need to enter your email. The sign-up link is on my website and in the description below. If you have a story of your own to share, I'd love to hear it. You can submit your fairy experiences through the form on my website, where you'll also find the mailing list sign up and all ways to stay connected. All those links are going to be in the description, and some of them are pinned in the comments as well. A huge thank you to my supporters on Patreon, as well as everyone who has joined the channel, made a one-time donation through PayPal or Ko-fi, or subscribed to my newsletter in the paid version. Your support means the world and keeps this work going. I really appreciate you all so much. If you'd like to support this channel, all the options for support are in the description below. The stories in this video came courtesy of the Fairy Census, so a big thank you to everyone who participated in that. The stories were edited for dramatic reasons, but if you'd like to read the original Census stories, follow the link in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe if you're new. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to hit the bell to be notified when new videos go up. And until next time, this has been a visit from your scary fairy godmother.